Some number of years ago, there was a murmur in the Metroid community regarding a secret password that had been discovered. That's right, that's the password. Now, ordinarily, when an improper password is entered, the game will let you know. But Engage Ridley was different, because the game appeared to accept the password. Of course, the results were all but desirable. Depending on which version you were using, the game might crash, or boot Samus to a dead-end screen, or in the case of the 3DS Virtual Console, the device would freeze and have to be hard rebooted. There was some talk on the 3DS-related forums that this password caused memory overflow, which allowed the 3DS to be hacked. If this was the case, then this gaudy password was intentionally programmed into this specific game for this specific purpose. So, was it intentional, or was it a coincidence? You probably know the answer to this already. The Metroid password system is as complicated as it is because it needs to encode a lot of information. Which red doors were open, which missile containers were collected, what zone you're in, what your game time is, which bosses you've defeated, and which power-ups you've obtained, and whether they still appear as collectible objects in the world. In all, the password represents 128 bits, which results in 3.4 times 10 to the 38 different permutations. With the 64 characters available on the password screen, this many unique permutations can be encoded into a 22-character long password. Metroid's password requires 24 characters, so that's little wasted space. Because of this slight length mismatch, and as added security, the password requires a checksum match to be accepted as legitimate. What this means in effect is that, if entered randomly, 1 out of the 256 passwords would actually be accepted by the game, so while the odds of landing a playable password is quite high for the password's length, it's low in terms of human tolerance. Now back to Engage Ridley. There are 5 zones in Metroid, which you switch through when you use a zone elevator. The starting zone information is encoded in the password as well. To encode as many as 5 locations, the minimum number of bits you need is 3. However, the password devotes 4 bits to your starting zone. This accommodates 16 possible locations, although only 5 are valid. This means the probability that, if entered randomly, about 1 out of every 820 passwords will be accepted and start you in a valid zone. So by now you've probably figured out essentially what's happening. The Engage Ridley password starts you at an invalid location. You're flagged to start at Turian, but that pesky 4th bit, the so-called reset bit, is also checked, which is entirely what causes the meltdown. It's not an intentional code, it's just a coincidence. You've probably heard of the Justin Bailey code. This too is a coincidental code. It's just one that happens to pass the checksum and spawn you in a legal zone. Remember, 1 in about 820. The only password that seems to be an intentional bypass to the password system, that was hard-coded in, is the famous NAR password. This password gives you unlimited energy and missiles and all power-ups. It was an intentional debug password and is the only thing that counts as a cheat in Metroid. So now, after all of that, I have a password for you to try that I've created. This one passes checksum and puts you in a legal zone. It is technically playable. Be warned though, you don't have the morph ball, so you can't backtrack. I suppose you could go back up the elevator to Brinstar and use the second controller trick to warp you back to the start, but then you effectively have to play through the game normally. Where's the fun in that? Instead, tackle Turian is intended. You don't have the long beam, but you do have the ice beam and 156 missiles. This means that if you're careful, you can beat the game. Kill Metroids in the energy rings to get your life and missile count up. Don't let the Metroids touch you, it's almost certainly a death sentence since you can't bomb them to get away. All 5 of the Zebatite barriers are still intact, which will be a bit costly to overcome with your missile supply. But the good news is that, appropriate to the password name, Mother Brain's already dead. Despite lacking the high jump boots, the escape is beatable, especially without the countdown timer breathing down your neck. Simply escape Turian to win the game, but don't expect any praise. With a logged 2.5 million hour playtime, that's over 300 years, you're stuck with the bad ending.